Now let's talk about the state of our parliament, shall we? Because we know, don't we, by now that it's not ideal, is it? Whatever side of the fence you're on, I mean, surely you're not looking with wonder and pride at the goings-on in our parliament, are you, at the moment? The latest development today is that now MPs are going to get some extra cash for extra security. There's been an amount of money, £31 million to be precise, which will go to MPs that are concerned for their safety. Jacqueline, what do you make to this development?
Well, I think it's absolutely appalling, frankly. I have no objection to the package, the fund that's been put in place to make sure that the members of Parliament are safe. But that is merely a sticking plaster on what is going on the realpolitik. And what we have seen is we've seen some of these pro-Palestinian, I call them extremists, frankly. They were at Tobias Ellwood's home, Labour MPs' offices. They're sort of being barricaded in, their staff. Even Keir Starmer's office, I think, had a problem fairly recently as well. And then we've got these groups and they're sort of storming into councils and council meetings. And even, I think, we had something, I think it was a Conservative fundraising dinner and these people stormed in.
Yeah.
This is not acceptable. In this country, we have a democracy. And that democracy says your representative represents everybody in that constituency. It's irrelevant of their colour, their creed, their religion. They try and represent, and I was an MEP for 15 years, you try and represent everybody equally. And this isn't just about, or it appears to be about, those who shout loudest. And I think people are getting sick to death of certain minority groups who are shouting loudest because they then want the MP to do exactly what they say. This isn't how a democracy works. You can certainly lobby your MP. You can go to Parliament and lobby your MP. You can stand for Parliament yourself. But what you cannot do is demand that your Member of Parliament or your councillor votes in a particular way that is yours.
But you can do that.
No, you can demand it.
What happened last week happened.
No, that's what I'm saying. And also, of course, but that is not actually how our democracy works. So those that continue to do it, they have to be stopped. This is not acceptable. It didn't help with the controversy at the House of Commons last week. That was an absolute disgrace, the way that unfolded. And you know, things need to be sorted out. As I said, the sticking plaster is no good. We've got to get to the bottom of this and people need to understand how a democracy works.
Mike?
Well, I'm not entirely sure what Jacqueline's advocating, but that's OK.
Well, I know what I'm advocating. Thanks very much.
I'm sure you do. I didn't really understand, but that's fine. I don't need to necessarily.
Sort of comments that.
I think this 31 million is good. I mean, obviously, because we want our parliamentarians to be safe. And I think we live in a country where, generally speaking, probably most of us do feel safe most of the time. I mean, certainly I do. However, we also live in a country where we've had, so very sadly, had 2 MPs murdered in the last 8 years, one of them by a far-right extremist, one of them by a Islamist extremist. So it is the case that MPs need to be safe, and it is the case that certainly during the Brexit period, and I think it's recurring again now due to what's going on in Israel and Gaza, that MPs are subject to threats and have been subject to certainly threats of violence as well. So this 31 million is definitely a good thing because we want our elected representatives to be safe. I just want to question you, though,
when you say, like, you know, most people in this country feel safe and all the rest of it, there'll be loads of my viewers that are Jewish. They'll be shouting at their screens now going, well, I don't feel safe. I feel like I can't even go into central London on a Saturday.
Right.
And that's not an infrequent occurrence.
No, it's not. I mean, I was reading earlier about statistics, and there has been, of course, an increase in anti-Jewish violence, and there's been an increase in anti-Muslim violence as well. The anti-Muslim violence has gone up it's trebled in the last year.
Yeah, but
and this will be one result of the fact that, you know, there are, of course, understandable tensions around what's going on in Gaza, and understandably, people have very, very deeply held opinions.
No, but this is
so we as a society do need to manage it. We need to enable people to protest, but it needs to be handled in a way where it is safe. And the police need to step up and make sure that any violence is being dealt with.
This is predominantly anti-Semitism. This is predominantly Islamic extremist groups who are basically threatening and frightening the life out of our elected representatives and also members of the public. We'll probably come on to the consequences of these marches and protests that have gone on for the last 4 months. But as Michelle quite rightly says, if you are Jewish and you live in London, or around the country, you are under threat. People are terrified to go out of their houses. They're worried about their children going to school, and that has to be dealt with. And this is about a minority. These are minorities. These are minority groups, and they are trying to call the shots, and they cannot be allowed to. And we all have to get together and band together and make sure they understand how a democracy works and what the rule of law is. If you don't want to comply with the rule of law, if you want to bully everybody to death, you're living in the wrong country.
I mean, I'll play a clip in a minute of Chris Bryant. You might have seen this a couple of days ago. He was actually talking about the pressure that had been placed on the House. How day flies, doesn't it? Was it a week ago now? Was it last Wednesday? Let's just have a little listen, remind ourselves of what he had to say.
The way we do our business in Parliament is terrible. I mean, we brought ourselves terribly into disrepute, I think, on Wednesday.
But were you put up to that filibuster, or did you take it upon yourself?
A bit of both, if I'm honest. I think the whole day was grubby, right. And we need a system which doesn't allow people to manipulate the rules to be able to get what they want.
Which you did.
See, I find that pretty damn disgraceful, actually. I don't find that funny.
Me too.
And I don't know why Chris seems to find that quite amusing. And this whole situation, that we are in a situation, it's all well and good saying, oh, yeah, we're a democracy and all. But evidently, if you threaten people, you've had Harriet Harman now saying, actually, MPs should be able to work from and vote from home. And I think that's disgraceful. Because then you're kowtowing to extremist people that are influencing democracy, that are making it less like a democracy and almost some kind of weird edge towards some kind of dictatorship, which we are not in this country. When you saw Chris Bryant responding like that, what did you make to it?
I think he's just being incredibly honest, to be honest. And he's saying that we have an outdated system in the House of Commons which didn't function in the way that it should have done last week, and it needs to be updated. And when he made the point that when he used to be a Hackney councillor, I was watching the clip earlier on, they would take a motion and they would take all the amendments to that motion and all of them would be heard. Whereas in the Commons at the moment, as you know, if a motion is put forward, as last week by the SNP, standard procedure is only the government amendment can be heard and not the Labour motion. And he's saying, well, that should be changed so that all different amendments can be heard, which just seems quite logical.
Has
and
he
to
raised
me, is more democratic. I'm sorry?
Has he raised that concern before?
I've got no idea.
No,
I don't know.
This is what
but it's been raised now, and clearly in light of last week, we know that this is an issue.
No, but this is ludicrous. We have a practice and a protocol in the House of Commons which has been valid for years, giving opposition parties their days. And that's absolutely quite right. What happened last week was an interference with the Speaker by the Labour Party. Whoever the individuals are, it's entirely up to... I'm not going to point fingers at exactly who it was. It was absolutely outrageous, and it led... And it wasn't just that. There are other things that they have been doing on their Twitter account over the last few months against certain policies of the Conservative Party. And it was a culmination of frustration in the end, actually even by the SNP, as well as the Conservative MPs, and they ended up walking out. So for Chris Bryant to sit there in this sort of, well, it was only, it wasn't really a nice thing to do. It's appalling. He's a senior MP. And to even, look at this in a sort of light-hearted fashion or think, oh, well, we should change the rules. No, we don't have to change the rules. We've got the rules. You comply to the rules. We don't always like the rules, but that's why they're there. And this has escalated a lot of this horrendous behaviour that has taken place, as well as showing from the river to the sea on Big Ben. I mean, just appalling.